We're so fortunate to have in the government great advocates for the role of hospitals in responding to family violence, initially with Minister Richardson, with Minister Hennessy and yourself. I applaud the Victorian government on your continuing commitment to family violence as a health issue, as evidenced as you talked about the investment of $38.4 million over the next 4 years to support us to do that work. So please join me in thanking Jenny Mikakos, Minister. In doing this work, it's critical that we listen to the voices of victims and survivors, to influence and inform how we improve our response to services and our services. So it's now my great pleasure to welcome Katie, an advocate for Safe Steps, our statewide family violence crisis response service. Katie's going to share her personal experience of family violence, including her interactions with the health system. Welcome, Katie.
This is a story about a 53-year-old woman's 3 experiences of family violence. The first abusive man was her father. He was both a victim and a perpetrator. He taught his daughter to tolerate his abuse and pander to controlling boyfriends. The second abusive man was the woman's husband. He won her heart, then stole her confidence, independence, and all their assets. Worst of all, he used their child as a weapon. The third abusive man was the woman's de facto partner who refused to let her go. When she took control and ended their 7-year relationship, the de facto retaliated by trying to destroy every aspect of her life. He psychologically harmed her child. Then he besieged her home, repeatedly loitering outside, coercing neighbours to enter, standing outside the front door, smashing neighbours' fences, breaking into the flat, and arranging late-night police welfare checks. The stalker taunted her by claiming her sex life had been electronically monitored by others for the 4 years that they lived in a particular building. He tracked her daily activities via mobile phone and knew when a bank transaction had occurred. Finally, he deliberately damaged her reputation with 2 employers, causing her to voluntarily resign from a rewarding role and prompting a manager of the second job to warn that the stalker's recent contact had been toxic to her career. That woman, the victim of 3 abusive men, is me. But it could be you, your mother, your sister, your friend, your colleague, your neighbour. Globally, 1 in 3 women experience partner violence, and this means about 70 of you here today have experienced family violence, are living with it, or are touched through someone else. Family violence can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. No one is immunised at birth against family violence, homelessness, poverty, mental and physical illness, which often coincide. We are all vulnerable, and for better or worse, we fall down or climb up the ladder of life. While family violence is one of the worst things that have ever happened to me, I'm not a victim. It's also been a making of me. I'm a survivor who found strength in acts of resistance against these perpetrators. I stood up to my father to protect myself, my mother, and my sister. I did everything I could to protect my child during marriage and since. I have held my stalker legally accountable when he breached an intervention order more than 100 times. He received a community corrections order and now faces jail if he breaches the current 5-year IVO. My ex-husband is now with his 3rd wife, and my stalker, well, he psychologically damaged 3 women in the 25 years before me, so it's likely that another woman is currently in his grasp. The family violence perpetrated by my father, my husband, and my de facto did not begin with me, nor did it end with me. It is very hard and humiliating for me to acknowledge these family violence experiences in public. I know some of you will be thinking, what's wrong? Why does it keep happening to her? But it's not about me. It keeps happening because there are so many men choosing to harm their partners. They believe that they are better than women. They control us and exert power over us because they can, and they know how to get away with it. These men whom we once trusted and loved lie to themselves and to us. They say it won't happen again, but it does. They repeatedly say we deserved it, but we deserve better. If we want to be free of family violence, we must all change this patriarchal culture where women are not equal in the home, at work, or in the community. Perhaps some of you are now wondering why I didn't leave. Well, I had no independent money and nowhere to go. I was scared for myself, but I was terrified that he would hurt or take my toddler. I now know that leaving is a process. Most women leave 4 to 5 times before they can finally get away from their abusers. Are you asking why I didn't get help? Well, I didn't know who to turn to, and I thought no one would believe me. Abusers do your head in through a gradual process of psychological dismemberment. Bit by bit, I lost most of myself. When I married in 2002, I didn't know what family violence actually meant. I thought family violence victims were other, the stereotyped, battered, bruised woman. Well, that's how the police, the courts and health professionals generally defined it before the Family Violence Act changed. I didn't think of my experiences as family violence, yet I knew things were very wrong in the marriage. Like my mother, a bride of the 60s, I just tried harder to keep the peace by minimising his behaviours and ignoring my own feelings. Stigma also kept me silent. In my family, serious things were private, and if I maintained my perfect mask, then no one would ever know. I've now learnt that family violence is everyone's business, and it must be core business for all health professionals. Family violence and illness were the main reasons I fell down life's ladder from privilege to disadvantage. I was trapped by fear that I could not provide for myself and my disabled child. I feared being poor, homeless, unable to meet my little one's needs. And the things I feared most came true. My husband broke down the heavy wooden door of our Victorian terrace, and when the police took him away, I had $3.75 in my account for food and nappies. The assets, of course, were under his name in legal structures that would require an unaffordable forensic accountant. Even Centrelink couldn't provide rent assistance because the lease was in my husband's name, and he instructed the real estate not to share it. Later, my child and I ended up in social housing, where we were burgled and threatened by co-tenants. We existed on Centrelink payments, and because of my child's special needs, his disabilities, I was unable to work for 3 years whilst arranging all his paediatric interventions, most of which I paid for. They were not available in the public system, until we received, through DHHS, disability support funding through the DSR register. Parental handovers, the collection and return of our child, became so abusive, my friends attended when they could, and at other times I hired a private security guard. During the past 13 years, my child has met with approximately 40 paediatric health professionals. Only a few explored our family violence experiences. The first was a wonderful maternal and child nurse who asked about the pre-birth care and the labour. She discovered that I'd gone to all the antenatal appointments and classes alone, and that I had my mother, sister and brother-in-law in the delivery room to manage my husband if he chose to show up. That nurse immediately provided enhanced home visits, a sleep school, and advocated for creche care. The others who asked, listened and acted were Bez, the Melbourne Magistrate Court's legendary family violence worker, and the pioneering magistrate Anne Goldsborough, who was the very first authority figure to officially recognise how badly damaged we were and why we needed assistance. Sadly, other health workers missed many, many opportunities. A paediatrician did nothing when the father threatened to harm me in her office. Another paediatrician refused to continue seeing my child after receiving a letter from my husband's solicitor forbidding treatment of known conditions which the father disputed. The doctor said my child could return, quote, once the family court matters were resolved. In December this year, it will be 10 years since I first walked into the family court, but our child's needs have not been resolved. More recently, I emailed the current paediatrician about my child threatening self-harm and suicide. He planned to stockpile the retractable leads from pencils. I haven't received a response to that email. I wonder if these doctors thought family violence, our family violence, was none of their business. What I hope you will learn today is that family violence is everyone's business. If you don't ask, we may not tell. Looking back, I should have walked into one of the 6 hospitals near our East Melbourne rented house. Hospitals are safe places where I could have fled 24/7. In 2007, when the worst violence was happening in the marriage, if I presented to your hospital, would anyone have routinely asked me if things were okay at home? There were no visible signs. Would you have said, how are things with your child, your husband? There are other women like me right now who are waiting for you to ask those questions. If a woman discloses, please work with her unique strengths, because we have developed many skills through acts of resistance against these abusers. And please try and coordinate a whole system response so victims aren't caught, as I was, between the gaps of the health, welfare, education and legal silos. You can save lives by offering women and children more timely, accessible and affordable options. Money, housing, legal, medical and mental health services. This hospital response program today can make a difference. You can save women and children from being harmed and killed. And if this program had existed 15 years ago when my husband's violence and abuse started, perhaps my story would have been different. I am now rewriting my past and creating a meaningful present. I'm not a victim. I'm a woman who is learning to love wisely. And when I'm with my Safe Steps survivor sisters, as we call ourselves, we share things no one else knows. The harrowing, terrible things of being pulled by your hair across a floor and raped in front of your child. This is not my story, but it is the story of one of my survivor sisters. We gain support from each other because we are accepted and respected and there is no judgment. And we know that we are the lucky ones. We are alive and we must work with you to end family violence. Safety begins with each of us, and that's why I'm here today, hard as it is. Because a 3-year-old child should never do what my dear little one had to do when he stood between his parents' legs, looking up at us saying, "Dada, no hurt, Mama." Thank you.